Bobby Lee Claremont and the Criminal Element by Jeannie Mobley. Dyersburg, Tennessee, 6:36 p.m. I woke to the concerned face of Nanette O'Halloran and the feeling of a cold towel being pressed painfully against a lump on the back of my head. The other occupants of the car were gathered around Nanette, watching me with varying degrees of interest. I tried to sit up straighter and winced at the shock of pain between my legs. Nanette, seeing my expression, gently pressed me back down into a reclining position. "Be still, Bobby Lee. You've taken a nasty knock on the head." I was glad she thought it was only my head that hurt. "I think you need a doctor." "There must be a doctor somewhere on this train," Bugeaud said, but no one moved to go find one. I groaned. "I'll be fine. It's just a bump on the head is all. I've had worse." "But you're bleeding," Nanette protested. "What on earth happened?" I was looking past Nanette at Bugeaud and Kelly, standing side by side as if they were friends and not rivals. Kelly didn't seem all that concerned that I might rat him out, but Bugeaud did. "I was waylaid in an alley," I said. "It was stupid. I should have been paying more attention." A slight smirk curled Kelly's lips, but he said nothing. Bugeaud frowned. "Good gracious," Nanette said. "Were you robbed?" I shrugged, or tried to. My head was pounding, and any movement hurt. I couldn't exactly admit to losing possessions I shouldn't have had to start with, especially not to Nanette, who'd called me a good boy. "I didn't have anything to steal," I said. "Did you see who did it?" I glanced at Kelly and winced at the gloating expression on his face. "It was just local kids, I think." Nanette turned to Sergeant Hayworth. "You're a police officer. Aren't you going to do anything?" "Well, unfortunately, the perpetrators are back in Memphis, and we're not, ma'am. There's not much I can do, but if young Mr. Claremont cares to make a statement, I can wire it back to Memphis at the next stop." "I don't feel like talking just now," I said, closing my eyes. I couldn't bear to look at Kelly and Bugeaud any longer. My embarrassment and shame at having been so foolish was making it hard for me to face them. I thought that if I pretended to need rest, they might leave me alone. "You shouldn't go to sleep," Malcolm said. "He's likely concussed. He should stay awake until we're sure he isn't going into shock." "Someone should sit with him," Nanette said. "I'll stay with him for a bit," Sergeant Hayworth said. "That way, if he wants to make a statement when he feels up to it, he can." The others all agreed to this plan and dispersed, though Kelly gave me one last challenging smirk as if to say, "Talk to the cop, and you're dead, kid." Not that he needed to. I wasn't a snitch. Unfortunately, I wasn't much of a criminal either by the looks of it. I had proven myself too careless and naive, and I hadn't warned Nanette either. All in all, I'd turned out to be useless. My only chance of saving face now was to keep my mouth shut and avoid giving Hayworth anything to chew on. So I stretched out across the seat, letting my feet hang out into the aisle, gingerly positioning my bruised scalp against the cool towel that Nanette had left with me, intent on ignoring Hayworth. He took the seat opposite, facing me. Hayworth didn't speak right away either. He leaned back in the seat and crossed his legs comfortably, watching me with a casual smile. The blissful silence lasted until the rain made a brief stop in Dyersville. But then the thin stream of local travelers had made their way on and off, and the train rolled out of the station again. Hayworth spoke. "What I'm trying to figure out," he said, "is how a kid who grew up on the streets of the old quarter could have gotten himself waylaid in an alley in Memphis." I had been letting the rocking train lull me, but his words jarred me back awake. I swallowed hard, but I didn't look at him. I didn't want him to see my alarm in case he was just making a guess about my past. After all, he could have guessed the old quarter had been my home from my accent and my command of French. "The old quarter's not such a bad place," I said cautiously. "Not all of it." "But the parts you're familiar with are, aren't they, Robert E. Lee Claremont? With such a distinctive name, it wasn't hard at all for me to make inquiries, which I did by telegraph back in Jackson. A detailed reply was waiting for me in Memphis. Seems there's a Sister Mary Magdalene back home who's mighty worried about your whereabouts. And there's the matter of $12 missing from the fund for the poor at the Sisters of Charitable Mercy Convent. I closed my eyes and let out a deep sigh. Why had I been so foolish as to tell a cop my real name? I had done nothing but make foolish mistakes since the moment I had left New Orleans. Now I would never see Chicago, or the rest of the $200 for which I had just taken a beating. I opened my eyes again and sat up. Are you going to arrest me? Well, now, it seems that the sisters really are feeling right charitable these days. Sister Mary Magdalene is willing to forgive the theft from the poor box if she can get you back safe and sound. He gave a little chuckle. Of course, they may have their own punishment worked out for you. You might prefer to go to jail. I reckoned he was right about that. Then you're sending me back? You seem like a smart, capable young man, Bobby Lee. Plenty capable to strike out on your own in the world. Hardly seems fair that you should be pinned down under the thumb of that old biddy at the convent. I was a little surprised when a bolt of lightning didn't strike him down for calling Sister Mary Magdalene an old biddy. Sometimes it was hard to separate her in my mind from the vengeance of God himself. But as nothing fatal happened, I thought about what he had said, trying to make sense of it. If he wasn't going to arrest me or take me back to the sisters, why had he bothered to find out about me, or tell me that he had? I waited warily. Tell me, son, what have Bugeaud and Mrs. O'Halloran been telling you? Because I know they've been talking, and I know they're up to something. A sweet-faced kid like yourself is apparently irresistible to the likes of them. I shrugged. Mrs. O'Halloran just told me about her husband and the first time they met. And Bugeaud? Nothing. And Mr. Kelly? I shook my head, then regretted it. Not a thing. Tell me who beat you up, Bobby Lee. I already did, just local nobodies. Sergeant Hayworth gave an annoyed little sigh. Maybe I haven't made myself clear. I know where you come from, and I know what you did. I could send you back. Or I could have you arrested and sent to the workhouse for delinquent children. Or, he paused to make sure he had my full attention. He did. You can help me with my case, and I'll help you with yours. You tell me what that crowd is up to, and I'll let you walk away in Chicago free and clear. The nuns will never know I saw you or heard about the poor box robbery. But I really don't know anything, I protested. Then find out, Hayworth said, unless you like the appeal of the workhouse. I swallowed hard. I had agreed to tell the cop nothing for $200. But if I didn't tell him something, Bugeaud's money would do me no good. On the other hand, if I went back on my word to Bugeaud, who knew what he'd do to me? My future life of crime would end before it started if I caved in under pressure now. Just my luck. On a train full of criminals and murderers, the biggest snake was the cop who'd offered to protect me. And if that wasn't the proof of the merits of crime, I didn't know what was. What do you want me to find out? I asked, my voice cracking a little with the shame of it. Bugeaud and LeBlanc, or O'Halloran as she's calling herself. I want to know what they're up to. What kind of con are they planning to pull on Jimmy's relations in Chicago? Were they lovers before Jimmy O'Halloran died? I want you to learn everything about them that you can, and I want you to tell me. I don't think they trust me that much, Sergeant. They've all seen me talking to you. Well, make them trust you, unless you're anxious to see the sisters again, or to be working for the state of Louisiana. He patted my knee gently, as if he actually cared about my well-being. I know, it's hard to think now with your head aching as it does. We'll talk further down the line, and you'll let me know what you've decided. He stood and walked away, apparently no longer concerned for my health. Alphonse Bugeaud, accompanied by the silent Malcolm, soon took his place. Unlike the sergeant, Bugeaud made no attempt to pretend sympathy or kindness regarding my condition. He was angry. He leaned in close to me and hissed, I expect the people I hire to do what they are paid to do. I did. I followed Mrs. O'Halloran and Mr. Kelly like you told me to. And you let yourself get caught. I would have thought a gutter snipe from the old quarter would have better sense. Serves you right, getting kicked in the bibbits. I winced again, both at his Cajun slang and at its truth. How you know what happened? I said, wondering what Kelly had told him. I wondered, too, that he knew my background so well. Was I that transparent to everyone on the train? When Bugeaud answered me, it was entirely in Cajun French. Because that's what he does as a warning. I hope you learned something from him before you let him catch you. They weren't en français, he interrupted, glancing nervously past me toward where the others sat, apparently too close for comfort. Monsieur Kelly ne parle pas français. I began again in French. They weren't plotting, if that's what you expected. They weren't talking about anything. They were only looking in shop windows. Then Mrs. O'Halloran ran into the Five and Dime, and he waited outside. That's when he caught me and told me to tell you he'd take care of Nanette from now on, and you should be thinking about saving your own skin. You told him I sent you? Bugeaud let out a string of Cajun curses that would have scorched the eyebrows off Beelzebub himself. And what did Nanette say when she came out and saw he had given you a beating? She didn't see. He left me in an alley behind some trash cans. She asked what he had been doing, and he only said he had been having a smoke. Mr. Bugeaud, what did he mean about saving your skin? What do you think he means, kid? You know what happened to my partner. A chill went through me. Had Kelly killed Jimmy? Or did Bugeaud kill him and Kelly was threatening to turn him in to the police? I leaned in closer to Bugeaud and spoke quietly. Don't worry, Mr. Bugeaud. I intend to earn that $200. I won't let you down. It's just that it would be easier for me to learn what you want to know if I knew what information you're after. What do you think the two of them are up to? I asked, still in French. I could see no point in taking unnecessary risks. Bugeaud glared at me. I'm not paying you to stick your nose in my business. You do what I tell you, no questions asked. Keep your mouth shut and your ears open and report it all to me, understand? I will decide what's important and what isn't. Bugeaud stood and turned to Malcolm, speaking once again in English. Stay with the brat and make sure he stays awake. Malcolm gave one silent nod and Bugeaud walked away. I let out a sigh and waited for Malcolm to take his turn at me, but he didn't. He remained silent, his expression impassive. I was grateful. I knew he could have said, I told you so, but he didn't. Bugeaud had done me one favor. He had left Malcolm to watch me, and his presence would keep the others away and give me time to think, as best I could with my aching head. I hadn't realized that Kelly and Bugeaud were so much at odds when I'd taken Bugeaud's offer. If I wanted to get myself in with the Chicago rackets, it seemed I had taken a job with the wrong side. The question now was what to do about it. I didn't want to back out on Bugeaud. For one thing, it was the only money I'd been offered. For another, Bugeaud was likely to have Malcolm pound me flat if I became a turncoat after agreeing to work for him. And what if Kelly did mean to hurt Nanette? How could I work for him? Then again, if I thwarted Kelly by working with Bugeaud, I'd never make it in the crime rings of Chicago. And then there was the whole mess with Hayworth. I was caught between the tree and the bark, just as Bugeaud had said. If I did what Bugeaud was paying me to do, keeping silent with the cops, Sergeant Hayworth would force me back to New Orleans and maybe even have me busting rocks on a chain gang. But if I squealed to the sergeant, I wouldn't collect on the $200 and I'd ruin my chance for a criminal career forever. I'd have to earn an honest living, which was another way to say a life of hard work and poverty. Plus, I'd have a reputation as a snitch, and Kelly would know it. That alone could get me killed in Chicago, a town where gangsters dined with the mayor. I sighed and closed my eyes. Malcolm dutifully nudged my foot with his, and I opened them again. I wasn't sleeping, I said. Malcolm said nothing. I glanced past him to the front doorway that led to the colored cars up ahead. A movement there caught my eye. I watched, and a moment later Leon's face appeared in the window. I remembered then my promise to snoop through the baggage, which I hadn't kept. Another failing I'd have to own up to. Leon was gesturing with his hand, waving me toward him. I glanced back at Malcolm and tried to smile. I'm perfectly all right. You don't need to babysit me no more. Malcolm did not so much as blink in response. He took his instructions only from Mr. Bugeaud. I looked back at Leon and gave a little shake of my head. He gestured to me again, looking annoyed. I sighed and turned my face to the window. Even if Malcolm would let me, I couldn't risk going to talk to Leon and Terence, not with Hayworth, Bugeaud, and Kelly all watching my every move. I was still pondering my options, none of which seemed all that good, when the whistle blew and the train began to slow, signaling a stop ahead. A few minutes later, the conductor announced Fulton, Kentucky, with a transfer for all those headed for Louisville. Louisville, Kentucky. That was the solution to all my problems. I had no idea what was in Louisville, but I knew what wouldn't be there. Alphonse Bugeaud, Brian Kelly, or Sergeant Hayworth. I had no money, but I could probably get the ticket master at Fulton to exchange the remainder of my ticket to Chicago for one to Louisville. I could explain to him, weepy-eyed, that I had brought the wrong ticket, and my aunt was waiting for me in Louisville. I was lost and all alone. Displays of frantic emotion were easy enough to conjure up, and usually got results. I was sure that Sergeant Hayworth was more interested in catching Jimmy's murderer than in catching me. By the time he realized I'd given him the slip, he'd be headed for Chicago, and I doubt he'd bother to send anyone after me. But just in case, I'd play it smart this time. I'd get a ticket all the way to Louisville, but I'd get off someplace sooner so he couldn't catch me at the end of the line. He wouldn't expect that, not after all the simple-minded mistakes I had made so far. I'd be giving up the $200 from Bugeaud, which I regretted. But under the circumstances, there was no long-term future for me in Chicago and far too much risk. Chances were, with Kelly's disapproval and Hayworth's threat, even if I went on to Chicago, I'd have little chance to either collect or use that money. I cheered up, even as the whistle blew and sent a spike of pain through my bruised head. My salvation was at hand, and my hopes for a future in crime restored. After all, Kentucky produced its fair share of moonshine.